Welcome to the December 3rd, 2019 Planning and Zoning Board meeting from Milford, Connecticut. Please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. If I can have roll call from my left.
I'm Brian Collegian.
Nancy Austin.
John Grant.
Scott Marlowe.
Tom Panzella.
Jim Cater.
Peggy Kearney.
Bob Sadie.
And I'm Carl Moore, acting chair, along with Meg Green and David Sulkis. First item on the agenda. We have a postponement from 3335 Laurel Avenue. If anyone's here for that public hearing, that meeting has been postponed until January 7th, 2020. Our next item on the agenda is to make an agenda modification. We have to have sign off from the board. Our first items from new business. We would like to start the agenda off with the first three items, then start off with old business from the first item. Then we'll go on to the public hearing where we will start with item 3 from the public hearing, then start from 1 and 2. Do we have a motion to accept the new agenda?
Make a motion.
We have a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? So moved. First item on agenda, inland wetlands appointment, recommendation of appointment per 18-161 of the Milford Code of Ordinance of Ranich Bahav to the mayor for the Inland Wetlands Agency.
Okay, Mr. Chair. So just a reminder to the board, this comes up every 2 to 4 years. I'm not sure. I think I forgot the time frame. But according to the city ordinances, the planning board there's one seat on the Inland Wetlands Board that is filled with a recommendation from the planning board. And it's staff recommends Mr. Bahav for that position.
So do we have a motion? Do we have a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? So moved. Second item on the agenda is 122 Kings Highway, referral of pursuant to CGS Section 824 to approve the sale of the city property acquired via foreclosure.
Again, as a reminder, when we receive an 824, it is to be voted on by the board, and that, however the vote goes, is then sent to the Board of Aldermen. If you approve it, the Board of Aldermen approves it by a simple majority. If you disapprove it, then they just have to have a supermajority. This particular application, it's straightforward. It's looking for permission to obviously sell a property that the city has acquired through foreclosure.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
No second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? So moved. Our third item on the agenda is 92 Oldfield Lane referral pursuant to CGS Section 824 for taking approximately 1,738 square feet of land for road widening for the purposes of public safety, as depicted on map of proposed street line revision of property known as 92 Oldfield Lane, Milford, Connecticut, City of Milford Department of Public Works, prepared by City of Milford Engineering Bureau, dated May 1st, 2017. Mr. Sulkus.
We actually have someone from the police department who can tell us why we're doing this.
Good evening. Sergeant Kraniak from the Traffic Division of the Police Department. We were asked to look at the area at 92 Old Field in regards to a street widening project that the city had done, or was working on. The area in question hadn't been completed yet from the front of that property. Specifically, there was a wall that is now in line with the new curb that goes from the east side of that property to the west side of that property. We were asked to look at the safety of that curb, the wall, and the land that protrudes in front of the wall. What I looked at was that there was about 8 feet from end to end went out into the roadway as you looked east to west there. We made a fake line on the back of the curb, showed that there was part of the wall was in front of that line where the curb would go. Basically, my study resulted in the recommendation to move the wall and align the curb as the project was going to, and that was from 2016, I apologize.
So basically, again, this is an 824 for the city's taking of the property to fix this issue.
Any questions from the board?
Just, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Sulkus, is this private property that's being taken?
Yes, I believe it is.
And so I guess I just was with the process. When they widened the road, this wasn't something that they thought about before they widened the road?
Well, anytime the city widens the road, we like to widen it within our own right-of-way. Sometimes we can't do that, and this is one of those cases. So we're going beyond. We're going to be changing the boundary line of the right-of-way.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
You said the wall's being moved. Is it moved or removed? Is it going to be moved someplace?
It would need to be moved, I would imagine, if they requested it still to be there, back off the roadway.
Because I thought I saw somewhere in there said being removed. So I didn't know if they were just going to move it in and still have the wall.
That's not really up to me.
I wasn't sure. But the other question was, how do they feel about it? They okay with this? They think it's fair? I mean, it all looks good to me. I looked at everything, read it. It looks good what you guys are doing. It makes a lot of sense. How do the people living there feel about it?
To be quite honest, I didn't speak to them. I just did the study to see if the wall was an issue. I would imagine they weren't happy with it, but I don't know. The properties on each side of it were adjusted from old pictures from what I had seen to what we had done there. The city had done there for the widening. It looked like they all had gotten adjusted.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just for clarification, we do have written motions, and it's important for the record that it's a motion to approve. And I just want to also clarify that your two previous motions, actually for 122 Kings Highway and the Inland Wetlands Appointment, those were motions to approve. I just want to clarify that for the record. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Do we have a motion for 92 Oldfield Lane?
I move to approve the referral pursuant to CGS 8-24 for taking approximately 1,738 square feet of land for road widening for the purpose of public safety as depicted on map of proposed street line revision at property known as 92 Oldfield Lane, Milford, Connecticut. City of Milford Department of Public Works, prepared by City of Milford Engineering Bureau, dated May 1st, 2017.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Pass. Our next item on the agenda, we go back to the old business, which should be closed by December 24th, 2019, and voted on by February 6, 2020. It's the proposed change to the City of Milford zoning regulations. Petition of Kevin Cursadine for changes to Article 5, Section 5.2.1, 5.2.5, 5.3.6, and 11.2 to allow for electrical digital billboard signs.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Cursadine. My office is at 3 Lafayette Street here in Milford. We were here 2 weeks ago. The board had some questions. With me tonight, I should mention, is the applicant, Mr. Dominic DiMartino. Also here again is David Gannett from Outfront Media, who is an associate on the project. Jim Amon, a consultant, who you know. We have Chang Tien, our expert from the last meeting, who is back here again as well. And we have another expert, Kermit Hua, as a traffic engineer. I've submitted, as soon as I could, given the short week last week, the study that Mr. Sadi had asked for. We had a handout at the last meeting that was a summary of the study. We've submitted that study along with a guideline memorandum from 2007. The study's from 2012. It's a federal highway study that talks about the safety and distracted driving and the fact that we'll talk more about it in a few minutes, but the fact that they found that there was no increase in distracted driving based on that study. There was some discussions previously about prior applications for this that had been, either denied or maybe was there minutes of those prior applications. This process with a different applicant and a different attorney had started in 2014-2015 timeframe. To the best of my knowledge, a hearing was never opened by the board. I think it made it to the agenda one time, I think in 2017 maybe, but it never was opened and it never went forward on the agenda. So I don't think that there's any minutes. There's no previous denial. The other aspect of it is this is it's a different application than what was presented before. The language has been changed. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I don't know if Mr. Sulkas has any further information about that. We talked about it a little bit in between these meetings. The other clarification is, at the last meeting, I made the representation that the digital billboard in West Haven and I believe in Bridgeport operate on a 10-second circuit or flip, as they're called. And it's actually 8 seconds. I found out after the fact, so I wanted to make that clear to the board. And the regulation that we're proposing is for a 10-second flip, so it's 2 seconds longer than what you've seen. That federal study that I mentioned briefly recommends nothing, I think, shorter of an 8-second flip. So we're exceeding the federal and state standard, and 8 seconds is the state standard as well. But I wanted to clarify that what you see in West Haven is an 8-second delay or an 8-second rotation. I know it's difficult to get a lot of information, and I tried to present it as fully as possible rather than in piecemeal and get it to you as soon as possible, as soon as I could. We did reach out to a traffic engineer that I'll talk about in a minute, a gentleman from Philadelphia who made the trip up over the weekend and looked at all these sites and provided a letter. I didn't get that letter till today. I handed it out with some other information that I handed to you that I left either at your seat or handed it to you prior to the meeting. Like I said, we'll talk about that letter in a minute, but I wanted to let you know that came in today, and as soon as I got it, I sent it over, and I don't know if it was emailed or put in your Dropbox, but we did try to get everything to you as quickly as possible. One other clarification, and then I'll move on with the rest of the presentation. We had, in our presentation, we had 6 billboard locations, or 7 billboard locations or 7 billboards that would be impacted and be allowed to be converted if this regulation were approved. Mr. Sulkas had brought up a point that one of the billboards, it's down on the Devon, down by, right before you heading southbound or westbound on I-95 before you hit Stratford. One of those billboards does not meet the definition of adjacent to the I-95 corridor that we've proposed, so that billboard would not be able to be converted if this regulation were approved. So rather than 7 billboards, it's actually 6. And we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes about what the actual reality is of how many billboards would probably be changed over based on the economics of it and the market conditions. So I tried to focus on the presentation and with our expert last month. Just as a quick reminder, this board has full discretion when they're doing a regulation change. They're acting in a legislative capacity. So there's no set site plan standard or special permit standard that we can run down with engineers or experts and say, check, 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 we've met all those, you should approve it. In this case, the standard is if it passes a 2-part test, a board's regulation would be upheld if it was challenged. If it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan is your zoning regulations and your zoning map, and secondly, is it related to the normal police power purposes that are given to the board under the Connecticut general statutes. And those police powers are health, safety, welfare of the community. So you're doing a critical thinking analysis, whether you're doing it on your own and you're proposing your own regulation change, or whether someone's coming to you and asking for a regulation change. And it's more of there's not hard facts to check off. It's more of a softer look at it, and you have to look and see whether you think it's in violation of the comprehensive plan or the zoning regulations, and whether it's in violation of your plan of conservation and development. I do want to highlight that in your own Milford zoning regs, under section 1.1 purposes, the interest of protecting and promoting the public health, safety, and welfare shall be deemed to include the following items, among others. And it goes down in 1.1.6 is economic health, the provision for the economic health of the community. So for many years, and you hear this a lot, and I think that planning and zoning boards take this position, is that they're not approving applications for somebody's financial benefit, which is partially true. But when you're talking about setting your zoning regulations, you have to take into consideration the existing development, conservation. There's at least 5 or 6 different things to take into consideration. One of them is economic health. And the Plan of Conservation and Development, in its introduction, your own Plan of Conservation and Development in its introduction, which was, I think it was last done in 2012, and it's due to be redone in 2022. The statute 8-23 requires that the statement of policies, goals, and standards for the physical and economic development of a municipality. So those 2 things, when I'm talking about economics, and we'll talk about the benefits to the Milford community and the Milford business community in a few minutes. But the zoning regulations set the stage for a vibrant and economically prosperous community. And we will explain tonight how we believe this application ties into that. So the statute requires consideration of economic development. The specific benefits to the community. At first, when I heard those comments, I wasn't really sure whether we're talking about what's the city getting for, if they approve this application. But when I looked at it more objectively and from a positive viewpoint, I think that was really related to, is it good for the community, and is it economically healthy for the community? I think that's where those questions were coming from. So our answer to that is yes. The digital billboards, and I'm going to run down some specific things that we mentioned briefly, but the benefits, there is free advertising to the city. I provided a memorandum of understanding. I'll talk about that briefly in a minute. Increased tax revenue from the new boards, which are expensive to build. Right now, the boards are old, and it's probably de minimis tax revenue. Here's the really important part. It's cheaper advertising for the small business owner, and it's not only cheaper advertising, it's more flexible advertising for the small business owner. So when you're considering this application, who's really going to use these digital billboards? The applicant, we've talked about that, and they said that 85% of their advertisers are local small business or local businesses, and about 15% are national businesses. So when you think about it, what these digital billboards are allowing a small business owner to do is not only not have to purchase a billboard for a month, which is what the standard is now, and there's varying prices for that. I don't know, several $1,000s a month, and you're stuck with that for the month. A digital billboard, someone can purchase it for the day, they can purchase it for the week, they can purchase it for, they have a seasonal sale or things along those lines. So it's flexible, and also it's less expensive because there's more faces, there's more billboard faces that are being shown. So it's actually less expensive for a small business owner. So what it's allowing the small business owner to do is to compete with the larger national online companies. We know who they are. Amazon is probably the first one that jumps to mind. It allows a small business owner to compete. They can't compete online with those types of companies, but they can compete locally. And if somebody can pick and choose, hey, I'm going to run that for 2 weeks around right before spring, and it's a landscape company or something like that, that's the type of thing that digital billboards allow business owners to do. It also makes Milford property owners and billboard owners competitive with the municipalities. They're allowed in Bridgeport, they're allowed in West Haven, they're allowed in New Haven. By not allowing them in Milford, at least on I-95, which is only where these billboards pursuant to this regulation would be allowed, by not allowing them, you're not setting somebody on the same level playing field as in other communities, which also, by the way, makes that other billboard more expensive for the local person. If someone's in Milford and they want to advertise on a board in West Haven or New Haven, for example, because there's less boards available, that cost is more. So if there was more boards, at least a few more boards, that price would be decreased to a certain extent. We've talked about emergency messaging, Amber Alerts for EMS messages, emergency flood messages. We've talked about allowing the city to advertise, possibly, city and city initiatives that also impact nonprofits and various entities and organizations. So it got the feeling like we were getting into like an adversarial, we were going to come back and answer all of your points, and you had some points and the public had some points, and I was going to come back and answer all those points. We think we've answered all those points, but we kind of want to make this more a holistic, comprehensive explanation of why you should approve this tonight. So there's the economic benefits to the city, there's the benefits to the small business owner. The distracted driving, the federal government and the state government have decided that they're safe for Connecticut and in certain locations and meeting certain specifications. The application we've provided meets those certain specifications. So we've also provided that study, and we also have a letter from Mr. Tantella, and I'm talking a little bit more than I normally would. I usually like to get up and state what I'm going to say and then sit down. But unfortunately, so please bear with me, and I appreciate your patience. I do have to get into this a little bit. Mr. Tantella, we talked to after the last meeting. I've spoken with our experts. Mr. Tantella is a professional engineer. He's licensed in many states. He's a professor at universities. He's a graduate of Princeton University, Master of Science in Engineering, Master of Arts, Civil Engineering, University of Pennsylvania. But more importantly, he is one of the known, if not the expert on distracted driving as far as research goes and digital billboards in the United States, if not North America. We've provided his CV with this application. He did come up over the weekend on the short notice. He was not able to make it here tonight, but he did provide that letter that I will highlight at this point in time. It's dated today. It was e-file or electronically filed with you today, and you have hard copies there. It says, Chairman Quish, during the past decade, I conducted traffic research examining the relationship between digital billboards and traffic safety in the United States. The digital billboards which I studied are comparable to those proposed for digital conversion in the city of Milford. They display static messages with no animation, have strictly controlled brightness and dwell time, which our application does, and will be professionally designed to comply with industry standards. Number one, the proposed conversions and analysis. I understand that a proposed zoning regulation text change would potentially allow for the conversion of several existing billboards in industrial zones along the I-95 corridor in Milford. The proposed digital billboard conversion locations are within 200 feet of the 95 corridor with face sizes of 14 feet by 48 feet. I'm also reading this I know you have it, I'm reading it for the benefit of the audience. Restricted brightness over ambient lighting and a dwell time limited to 10 seconds. I observed the existing locations and analyzed engineering parameters, including lines of sight, viewing angles, and key travel times and distances. Traffic safety. The issue of traffic safety in digital billboards was studied extensively over the last decade by government agencies, the academic community, and others. These studies include both theoretical, in parentheses science-based, and empirical, real-world data concerning the proposed digital conversions and traffic safety. I offer the following. The 2012 peer-reviewed research study by FHWA, which is what we've provided and at your request and as part of this, he attaches it as a reference, collectively studied digital billboards with dwell times of 8 to 10 seconds and used human factors analysis to conclude that drivers are not distracted by digital billboards along roads in 2 states. The study found that the data suggests that the drivers in this study directed the majority of their visual attention to areas of the roadway that were relevant to the task at hand, for example, the driving task. The researchers also opined that the results did not provide evidence indicating that digital technology of this type, as deployed and tested in the 2 selected cities, were associated with unacceptably long glances away from the road, adding that the demands of the driving task tend to affect the driver's self-regulation of gaze behavior, and he references one of the attachments. The 2007 United States Federal Highway Administration Guidance Memorandum, which you also, it's a 4-page document you also have a copy of, established the acceptable criteria for this technology and recommends that the duration of each display is generally between 4 and 10 seconds. 8 seconds is recommended. The proposed 10-second duration for these locations will comply. It's just a little bit further. My 2011 paper published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers examined accident statistics for billboards with 6, 8, and 10-second dwell times in Reading, Pennsylvania, and found consistent results among dwell times. My research used quantitative data and accident reports near digital billboards for periods of comparison in excess of 8 years by examining temporal, when and how frequent, and spatial, where and how far, comparisons under a variety of factors, size, display time, day-night conditions, etc. The data show that these types of controlled digital billboards are safety neutral and are statistically not linked to traffic accidents. In 2007, a study was also completed by the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute of the human factors in 2 different cities and found similar conclusions. VTTI's research showed that several driving performance measures in the presence of digital billboards are on par with those associated with everyday driving, such as the on-premises signs located at businesses, and that these performance measures included eye glance performance, speed maintenance, and lane keeping. The use of digital billboards has and continues to be safely and regularly permitted throughout the United States by numerous federal, state, and local units of government, including the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and is positively supported by FHWA research and others. In his he goes on to his professional opinion. Within a reasonable degree of engineering certainty and based on the design, location, configuration, size, height, and lighting that the proposed digital sign conversions, A, will not present a physical or visual obstruction to vehicles traveling on I-95. B, will not detract or interfere with the effectiveness of official traffic control devices. C, They are appropriate based on industry standards, traffic safety, visibility, among other things. And D, will comply with professional design and industry standards to include design lighting. And he encloses his curriculum vitae. So thank you for bearing with me. I wanted to read that. I thought the letter was important and summed up the studies that were the relevant studies, the federal studies. Mr. Sien will talk about the ambient noise that Mr. Sulcas had a question on. We'll get to that in a minute. The digital billboards are allowed by Connecticut General Statute 13A-123F, and it gives the guidelines for it, and it says 8 seconds and some other guidelines, which we meet all of those. So I'm just going to, I started the conversation that this is a, an exercise where it's a balancing decision. You have to weigh the objections and concerns of some community members against other community members. It's not an easy decision to make, but I do ask that if you, during this process, if you could please consider that in addition to the public comments in opposition, which I know are important for you to hear, and it's important for the public to have their voice heard and to say what they need to say, please don't disregard the studies that have presented, the experts that have either appeared or will appear here tonight to discuss it, and the facts that have been presented to you, the science, and both the science and the empirical data. I think I talked about the fact that it's only 6 billboards. This memorandum of understanding, I don't know if anybody has any questions on it. I can talk about it briefly. I tried to keep it to 1 page. I did call attorneys for applicants in other towns that have had this approved, and a couple of the comments I got were that the town attorneys typically don't like them because they're not enforceable, and they suggest that maybe there's an inappropriate quid pro quo. We'll approve it if you give us free advertising, which is not the intent here. I just want to make it clear, and Mr. Gannon will probably speak to it again briefly. This is something that they've offered from the very beginning. This is what they do, whether it's a good faith handshake, whether there's some written agreement to it. They're going to do it regardless of whether this document exists. It's a positive thing they do for the community. It helps with the local businesses, again, where they have that networking in the local Chamber of Commerce's. And it establishes a good rapport with the community. So I put this together at because we had mentioned it. I talked briefly about it with your Milford City Attorney. He has not gotten back to me on any comments with this, but we had a similar discussion about what would it look like, and making sure it was an appropriate document. The way this is spelled out here, it's just a memorandum of understanding. The city would be allowed an advertising spot for 10 seconds into 8 full spots, so the city would have 1 permanent flip of, say, for example, 16 advertising spots on the digital billboard. If it was a double-faced billboard, there would be 8 and 8, and the city would have 1 permanent spot, which I think comes out to, I don't know if it's 3 hours a day or something along those lines. And then it spells out what the expected responsibilities are. The company would provide the artwork for the advertisement, work with the city point of contact on it, serve as a community resource, which is really with respect to the Chamber of Commerce, local businesses, and nonprofits, whether there's guidance they can give them on advertising or if there's things available that they can help them with. And the city would identify an individual as an agent to interact with the company. I think if you don't have any questions, I can have Mr. Tsien talk about his points. Oh, one other issue was the uniformity issue that was brought up by Ms. Ducko. I provided a memo talking about that the application as presented, proposed regulation, meets the uniformity requirement, and there was a very brief legal analysis and some case law that is cited with that. But pending your questions, I'll be followed by Mr. Sien.
Through you, to Attorney Crusaden.
Sure.
Maybe I misunderstood. Did you say these were double-sided in your?
If you look at your, on the very front page of the package I gave you tonight, there is a spreadsheet, and some of them, if you drive down 95 or you look at one of these locations, some of them are single-faced and some of them are double-faced, meaning that they're not double-faced one right behind the other, they're double-faced. There's a board here and a board here facing 95, all the existing billboards. So that's what it meant by double-sided.
Any other questions? Ms. Kearney.
Hi, through you to Mr. Crusaden. You talked about revenue to the city and how much a billboard owner, I guess, pays in taxes or whatever for currently. Can you give us an idea of the difference? What kind of extra money would the city be taking in for these?
Well, I believe it's taxed as personal property, and so there's a depreciation aspect to that. The boards that have been in existence now are old, so I don't know what they're being, I don't have access to that information existing, but I talked to my client about the costs of what a new billboard would, if you replace the entire billboard in the same exact location, because the structure would not support the digital face. It could be upwards of $600,000 for that board, and if you have the assessment of about $420,000, and by the mill rate of 27 mills, it's probably about $11,000 or so for that one thing. If it's if you're just replacing a face, it might be $250,000 as the stated value of the billboard. And so that would be the type of tax revenue in a general sense. Yes.
I had one other question. Sorry. Do you know now what an 8-second or 10-second advertisement's going to cost a local advertiser?
That's a great question, and we've had those conversations. So a static billboard right now for a 1-month display could cost $4,000. A lot of it depends on how much time or how many billboards the advertiser buys, for how long they buy them. That's my understanding, and my client's here, and he can probably answer the question a lot better than I can. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I'll have Mr. Gannon answer that question for you.
David Gannon, Outfront Media, Washington Avenue, North Haven, Connecticut. So typically a static billboard is sold for a minimum of roughly, because of the production involved in it and the cost of the production, 60 days or 2 months or 2 4-week periods. And a digital billboard can be sold, is less expensive. So a static billboard would be $4,000 to $6,000 depending on the length of time. A digital billboard can be $2,000 to $3,500, $4,000 depending on the length of time. But more importantly, a small business can afford that if they want to advertise for a day, if they want to advertise for a week. We can now get them on the highway, which is impossible to do right now with the production costs of a static billboard. So when you look at a cost per thousand of a billboard versus a newspaper versus other means of advertising, this is truly the most cost-effective type of advertising.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is to Attorney Crusaden, please. I want to thank you for the information you've been giving to us, except we get a lot of stuff tonight, which is really hard to digest. But I have a couple questions. So the $11,000 you're estimating, you indicated prior to the number given that you have had billboards that have already, you said got down to zero value because of depreciation?
That's just a guess based on these billboards that have been there forever. I don't know, can you answer that better?
Yeah, it wouldn't be zero. It would be, if you looked at the city's, when you fill out the personal property records, I think it bottoms out at 40 or 45%. So there are taxes being paid, except that this piece of personal property has been depreciated over the years because most of the billboards in Milford have been up for a long period of time.
And what is the depreciation on the electronic billboards?
Well, we're going to start, so if we put up a new billboard, the new starting point would be a brand-new billboard, $600,000, and it's at 95% year one. And I think that's what the card states in Milford. And then if we converted a board to digital and modified an existing billboard, you'd be looking at approximately $350,000 to $400,000, which first year would translate into $7,800 in tax revenue.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question for Attorney Crusaden, please. This is on the study. I appreciate you gave it to us, but you recognize the study in 2012 deals with Richmond, Virginia, correct, and Reading, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
And they did find distractions in some parts of the study, did they not?
We have a traffic engineer here tonight that if you can, I can either have him answer that question now or we can.
Well, I just point this out because you made a comment that
Yeah.
we shouldn't disregard the studies, and we're not going to. On the other hand, we don't have to agree with what they say. You agree with that principle, correct?
Do I agree with the principle?
No, we don't have to agree with what the study says. We're not going to disregard it, but we don't have to agree with what the expert in his letter said that we've never met, or these studies. You don't have to agree with them.
It's at your discretion, as I said at the beginning. I just want it to be, one of the things you look for is a fair process to the applicant, so that I'm just asking that they not, if, for example, if there's just a bald allegation that they caused distracted driving, that you take into consideration the fact that we have a letter from an expert that could not be here tonight on short notice, that you take into consideration the federal traffic study, and that you take into consideration that the state of Connecticut and the federal government had decided that they're safe on I-95. I think that all of those are important factors to consider. You can disagree or at your discretion decide whether you want to believe the study or not. My point was I don't want it to just be overridden by emotion because there's people in the community that have a strong dislike for them, whether it's based on the fact or it's a subjective basis. I'd like you to consider that.
I can assure you that this member will take into account all materials you provide to us in a timely fashion for us to be able to get to the decision we need. The last question I had for you, in looking at the studies you provided to us and the federal materials in 2007, they were recommending an 8-second time frame, between 4 and 8, and then 8 second. Why can't you make this an 8-second time switch as opposed to the 10? Would it not mean increased revenues, increased ability of people to get their name on that billboard? And if you could just explain that to us, please.
I'll answer first, and then I don't know if Mr. Gannon has an answer. We wanted to make the flip as long as possible because we knew that there would be people in the community that were concerned about distracted driving. So our understanding was that the longer we made it, it would still be commercially viable. We can't really go beyond 10 seconds to be commercially viable. That would be better and that would be more acceptable to the board and to the community. And I remember Mr. Moore last meeting had asked, could we make it longer? And we can't make it longer. I can answer we could make it shorter, but maybe that's a question for the traffic engineer about why they recommend 8 versus 10. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that the local advertisers and national advertisers, 10 would be the maximum that we can do before people start falling off because all the other billboard companies operate at 8 and 10. So at a 10-second flip with 8 advertisers, each advertiser is going to get a little bit over 1,000 spots a day, and with 6 advertisers at 10 seconds, they're going to get 1,400 spots a day, so it's about 25% more. We haven't found that that's a big differential in people wanting to buy the billboards.
Thank you.
Any other questions before they continue their presentation?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Sokas.
Just to follow up to Mrs. Kearney's question about taxes. It's my understanding that in certain parts of the country, billboards are taxed based on income versus real property. What's the difference in revenues that the city could see if you were taxed based on the income the board generates versus the real property?
I'm not qualified to answer that because the billboards that I've built in Connecticut and Massachusetts, where I spent most of my time, they're taxed as personal property. So that would be something that a CPA would have to answer or an accountant would have to answer.
Would you represent the Connecticut Association of the Billboards, correct? No.
No, I represent Outfront Media, a billboard company.
A billboard company.
Right.
So as a billboard company, would you think it's better for the city? Would we get more tax dollars if we taxed you based on your income off of the board versus your personal property?
I can answer that as best I can. Are you saying that the city is going to change the way they identify or tax the billboards under a scenario that doesn't currently exist? Is that what the question is?
My understanding is that our assessor's office has actually been studying this and actually had contacted billboard companies about this, and they were very unresponsive. So that's why I'm taking this opportunity just to ask the question.
Well, if the assessor's office contacts us or my client, we can have the discussion. We don't know the answer to that. It wasn't an expected question. We tried to be prepared for everything tonight to get the hearing closed. If the city of Milford changes the way they assess billboards or other personal property, then the owner of that property would have to comply with it. I don't know what the difference would be in dollars to the city.
Sorry, through you. How many of the current 7 or 6 billboards are local advertisers versus national?
I would have to, I don't know the answer to that. Unfortunately, I didn't look, but typically in Connecticut, we experience anywhere from 15 to 20% national against 80 to 85 local. If you go to New York City, it's 95% national. So you go to the bigger markets, there's a lot more national ads. When you come to a smaller market, which would Connecticut would be considered, it reverses. It's the inverse of that.
Any other questions? Please continue with the presentation.
Hi there, Chang Tian, 2231 Lapsley Crescent, Oakville, Ontario, Canada. And I actually came back. I only have one little comment, little discussion to have about the ambient noise, which after the question last time, when I was unable to answer for the number of dBA, I went back and quantified it as a result. But I just also brought this with me in my carry-on today. They checked it. But this is the kind of fan that's in there, and there's 72 of them inside one of these 1448 digital billboards. So each one of these fans is rated for 46.3 dBA at 1 meter. So with 72 fans, that adds an extra 18.57 dB for a total of 65 dBA at 1 meter. So that's about 3 feet. And when you take that measurement at about 200 feet, which is a sort of minimum reasonable distance from one of these things, that works out to 28.5 dBA, which is something similar to leaves rustling in the wind or sort of rural nighttime quiet. So we believe it's not an issue. Anecdotally, there's one thing. I go on a lot of sort of installations and commissionings, and when we turn on these boards from the ground and the thing doesn't light up, we try to listen for the fans to see if the thing's on. But you can only hear them when you get up on the catwalk behind it. So on the ground, there's no way to tell it's powered on until you get on the catwalk and you hear these. So thank you. Apologies, I thought there might be a question. No? Okay, thank you.
David Gannon again. There's just one more thing I'd like to say. Outfront Media operates 8 of the billboard faces we're talking about now. So the 3 billboards, 6 faces on D'Amato Investment Properties up on Research Drive, and the face at Banner Drive at Mr. DiMartino's property. Our intention is not to convert all 8 faces to digital. We would like to do 2 up on Research Drive and 2 at Mr. DiMartino's property. We will not be converting all 8 faces. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that.
I think, pending any further questions, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Any update from Mr. Sulkus?
No.
So this is continued to be a public hearing, so anyone who would like to comment on the presentation, on the material that was presented this evening, against or for or against this presentation, please come forward.
Hi, good evening. Donna Dutko, 236 Buckingham Avenue. I have handouts again. I'm going to hand out that same excerpt from Chapter 124, Zoning, Section 8.2 Regulations, because I'm going to talk about it. I have case law here that talks about uniform zoning versus special permits, so I wanted you to have a basis for that. Okay, so to refresh your memory, last week I discussed the 8.2 regulations, where it states, all such regulations shall be uniform for each class or kind of buildings, structures, or use of land throughout each district. And then it goes on to say, however, it may provide that certain classes or kinds of building structures or uses of land are permitted only after obtaining a special permit or special exception. And this would, at the end it says, it's subject to standards set forth in the regulations and to conditions necessary to protect the public safety and convenience and property values. So basically what they're saying is, if a regulation is by right, which is what I'm understanding this proposal is, it's an allowed use, and that would fall under general regulations applied to every zone, every property use in that zone, versus a special permit. So this case law is Jean E. Summit et al. Versus Zoning Commission of the Town of Ridgefield, decided in 1962. So if you flip to paragraph 86 to 87, it talks about the history of the state statute and how it changed, how the state's intention was to make sure that the 8.2 was understood that all uses are uniform. So I'm going to read this. It says, the insertion of the phrase "to the use of land" in the third sentence of 8.2 is clear evidence of an intention to require that regulations for that use of land, like regulations for each class of buildings or structure, be uniform. And then it says, however, at the same time, however, the legislature added the provision authorizing the adoption of a zoning commission. I'm sorry, let me start again. The legislature added the provision authorizing the adoption by a zoning commission of regulations which would allow a use subject to standards set forth in the regulations and under special conditions after the obtaining of a special permit. And paragraph 87, I'm not sure if it's a paragraph, it's number 87, it says, in the law of zoning, special permit is used interchangeably with special exception. And it goes on to say, a special exception allows a property owner to put his property to a use which the regulation expressly permits, and that the conditions permitting the use must be found in the zoning regulations themselves. So what it's saying is, what I'm saying is that it's my opinion that these digital billboards should be by special permit, and that would give you the leverage to put conditions on where they're built and how they're built and all the stipulations that they're proposing in that proposed text change. But in order for you to make sure that it gets built along I-95 and has all these controls over it, it really needs to be by special permit, special exception, and it needs to be spelled out in the zoning regulations. That's my understanding, and I think that this case law highlights that concept. And that's all I have to say. So, good luck.
Anyone else wish to speak for or against this application?
John Barrett, 32 Holly Avenue, Milford. I'm also a partner in Barrett Outdoor Communications, one of the companies affected by this. I just want to address a couple of the issues brought up. Some of it was what went on in getting all these studies made. Now, besides being a partner in the company, I'm also the former chairman of Standard Safety and Technology for the Outdoor Advertising Association of America, and I also sit on their board of directors. And I was involved in getting these studies made. When the technology first came out, a great number of the board members, including myself, were absolutely convinced that this is a bad idea. This is dangerous. This is going to be distractions. We're going to be in big trouble. And so we pressed and had a study commissioned. We went to Virginia Tech. Why Virginia Tech? Because they are a leader in highway safety, engineering, and studies. Also, we'd be a very small fish in their big pool. Their major customer is the Federal Highway Administration. We figured very unlikely they're going to tilt things our way when they could piss off their major client. So we went off to Virginia Tech, and they designed an experiment. The experiments covered several towns. They used cars that were equipped with lasers that watched how people's eyes went across the subjects going past them. They also had cameras that studied the distance between the car and the adjacent stripes on the highway. So if the car drifted left or right because the person was looking off the other side, they'd know that. It also studied how fast
or frequently a car ran up to the car in front of it. They then had people of varying ages and sexes driving on everything from interstate highways to the equivalent of the Boston Post Road to regular city streets, both day and night, streets that had regular billboards, digital billboards, on-premise signs, and no signs. You've already heard that in the end they found out, for all intents and purposes, there was no difference in time clans. We weren't satisfied. So we hired a traffic engineer, actually the one who wrote the report for this one. Now, they went out and started a longitudinal study. So they went to sites that had billboards, looked back 10 years with all the traffic accidents that happened for the 1 mile prior and following the sign, and tallied that up, and then proceeded to measure these for, I believe we've gotten as far as 15 years. And lo and behold, there was no increase in traffic accidents along those sections of highway. Still weren't thrilled. This can't be right. So we went through and had a mathematician look at it. And being as I had to take calculus 3 or 4 times to pass, I won't go into the formulas on that, but all the advanced retro studies going through, and they again found no correlation. Then the federal government got involved because there was a very strong group within the Federal Highway Administration that thought this was a very bad thing. A guy by the name of Jerry Wachtel was brought in, and he's the one that brought forth the study you now see. Very anti-science. He actually ran a group against science. We were kind of upset because this seemed to be wrong to have a person with such a biased opinion designing an experiment. He went out, he ran it, it got peer-reviewed, and then the federal government refused to release the results. It wasn't until ABC News went through and filed a Freedom of Information Act request and found out that they found that signs were even safer than we did. So all that changed my mind about whether or not there's a safety issue. I've heard concerns about lighting, I've heard concerns about sound. Now, I have 5 of these up right now in different parts of the state. And I have studied all these. I have various environmental rewards from statewide organizations for all my work in the environment. And I have watched for all the implications of that. I even worked on designing a LED light fixture going through because I was concerned. And no matter how I tilt this around, I keep finding out that the major concerns don't pan out. I'm happy to take any questions anyone has. Otherwise, all right, thank you.
Anyone else wishes to speak for or against this application?
My name is Louis D'Amato, and I'm a partner in a firm of D'Amato Brothers Builders, and we've been in the town for some 60 years. I just want to make a comment to Mr. Sulkus. Mr. Sulkus, these billboards are personal property, and therefore they can't be financed at a bank. They used to, years ago, when banks were more liberal, they financed them. You basically have to get outside investors to invest, or you put your own money into it. So the income approach, I'm not so sure would work with this. So just to enlighten you a little bit as to what that is. My brother and I have been in town for some 60 years, and we specialize in industrial parks and strip shopping centers, small strip shops. We cater to the little guy. Incubator industrial space. We probably have some 500 tenants from Milford all the way up to Wesley, Rhode Island, basically along the coastline. And we rent to the little guy who's an important factor in Connecticut. He's the bulk of Connecticut business. And you people on this board are probably the most important board in any community because you dictate the economic welfare of these towns and cities. And I respect you for that. I think that I've got to tell you some facts here, that in the last 15 years, ever since we've had these major bank failures and so forth, my brother and I, we own some 1.3 million square feet of buildings, some 500 tenants, as I said. And they're all little guys. No major tenants, small, up to 10,000 square foot buildings. We built Pepe Farms Road, we built Research Drive, and other buildings around. And in the next few months, I'm going to bring you a tenant who came from, a buyer of a piece of land that I developed, which was very difficult to develop in Plains Road. And this buyer is from California, and he's involved in the aircraft industry. And he's going to put up a 50,000 square foot building, expandable to 70. And I'm kind of putting a plug in. I hope that we can get that approved in a rapid manner because he's ready to go, and he's going to employ more people. And that's the key here. We got to get jobs into the state of Connecticut. The key is jobs. Forget about everything else. You know, we got some crazy people running for different purposes. But in the last, let me tell you, as I go up the line, the shoreline into Rhode Island, we have these industrial parks and strip shopping centers. Before the Trump, he's a little bit crazy, but I had 30% vacancy in Milford, okay, and the surrounding area. We have some 250 tenants in this area, okay? We're down to 10%, only because the engine that is of Connecticut is Fairfield County. Now, we're getting the overflow from Fairfield. There is a recovery. There's no doubt about it, it's a recovery. But as you move up the line and you get into the London County, we're faced with a 30% vacancy. Now, I think that you people should look at this thing as a generator for jobs. And these little people who have businesses who need this exposure, you should entertain this. You should play. I know that I'm one of the billboard owners involved in this thing, but I got these billboards by the fact that the piece I bought on Research Drive was zoned from. So I kind of fell into it. I'm not a billboard guy, and I'm not even sure I want to put a digital billboard there. But they're expensive, and you can't finance it. You got to put your own money up. And I hate putting my own money up because as a builder and developer, you borrow all the time. So I would think that you ought to entertain this. I mean, we talk about distractions and various other things. It appears to me that there aren't any. I don't pay any attention to the billboards, but a lot of people do. And I think that you should really pay attention to this and follow the experts who tell you what this is. And don't forget, Milford, Connecticut is at the bottom of the heap when it comes to the economy and all these politicians who destroyed this state over the years. We've got to straighten this out. If we don't straighten it out, and you are the people who can do it, you should pay attention to this whole operation. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this application?
I'm Jean Servine, speaking against this application. I'm not going to repeat the things that I mentioned at the last public hearing, but I'm going to focus only on one thing, and I think we've already heard a lot about it, but it's that issue of safety. I think one thing I've gleaned from what I've heard so far is that the experts disagree. So there's a very simple question we ask. What is the purpose of digital billboards? And there's an easy answer, an obvious answer to that, to capture our attention. So the purpose is to capture our attention while we may be driving 65 to 75 miles per hour down I-95. Now, many studies have already been mentioned that say that's not a safety hazard. I ask just look at that in a common sense way. How can that not be a safety issue? Mr. Crusaden at the last meeting and now here talked about the study done by the Federal Highway Administration that concluded that digital billboards do not pose a safety risk. Recently, a comprehensive review of this study claimed that the conclusions are seriously flawed. This review was done in 2019 by the Veridian Group and reviewed by 14 international experts in traffic. The billboard industry has been touting the FHWA study as proof positive that digital billboards do not pose a threat to traffic safety. They say, however, that the issue is far from settled. A peer-reviewed critique of this study reported a number of problems with the methodology. The researchers were not familiar with the proper operation of their test equipment. The tested billboards were not as bright as those studied elsewhere. They only tested a handful of billboards, and the final report contained unexplained differences from earlier drafts. All this making the FHWA study conclusions highly suspect. As I was trying to find other studies about digital billboards regarding safety hazards, and there are many. Two pioneering studies, one of which has already been mentioned, was the Virginia Tech study in 2006, and one done by Swedish researchers at the National Road and Research Institute of Sweden in 2009. One comment and result from the Virginia study was that drivers taking their eyes off the road for more than 2 seconds greatly increases the risk of a crash. Also stated that nearly 80% of all crashes involve driver inattention. Sweden has given provisional approval for digital signs. They had given provisional approval for digital signs in 2006. But as a result of their study, ordered the removal of all digital signs. Now digital signs are banned entirely from the country of Sweden. Another study also stated that younger drivers, older drivers, and people with certain neurological conditions were particularly vulnerable to distraction. In other words, there are some audiences whose attention you should not seek to capture. There are many studies, but I'm sure you will, and I encourage you to do some research for yourself to see how some of these studies definitely are in conflict, but many studies continue to say that the billboards have a safety issue. So in the light of this information, I'd be hard-pressed to understand how this regulation amendment could be approved when there are still so many unanswered questions about safety. Experts differ, we've heard that tonight, but still there is a concern, and as long as there are concern, I think we also have to say that the safety issues should take precedent over all others. Thank you.
Good evening, Brian Anderson, 49 Ingersoll Road. Simply wanted to point out that there were 12 Milford residents who spoke in opposition 2 weeks ago, a total of 14 who were here in opposition, and another 3 who submitted, I believe that that's the number, 3 who submitted a letter in opposition. So I'd like the board members to keep that in mind. I am empathetic to what Mr. Crusaden has presented on behalf of his client, Mr. DiMartino. He has an issue that he needs to have resolved. My concern is, as I suggested, is that we're opening the door to unintended consequences. When I think of the billboards along I-95 now, particularly those that have been converted, I look at Ferry Boulevard in Stratford, where there are digital billboards that are eye level if you're on I-95, but there was a recent apartment building that was built right by the bridge abutment, and so those residents of that apartment have to deal with the digital billboards on a daily basis. I would imagine that it's a lease issue for them. If we're talking about West Avenue, Gloria Commons was established before a billboard was erected next door. Mr. Kersaden had mentioned that there would be one billboard eliminated. I was unclear whether that was the Gloria Commons site or the one adjacent to the railroad. So I'd like that clarified for the record. And I would just say, take your time. Do a thorough job. The questions that you're asking are good ones. You need not rush to judgment in this case because you've got the time to do further research and obtain a learned outcome. And I thank you for your time.
Good evening. John Hotchkiss, 74 Buckingham Place. I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to this regulation, mainly because of my experience as I drive along highways and I see lights flashing. Sometimes they're bright, sometimes they're dull, different images and so forth. It does affect me. I'm not sure how it affects other people. I'm not against this person or the small business owners in town that need additional revenue. If they can make a better way to make ends meet, I'm all for it. I'm just in opposition of something flashing in front of me as I drive up and down the highways. One place, just look at Las Vegas. They have flashing lights everywhere as you're driving. Maybe 10 years from now, Connecticut will be the same way if we add more and more and more. I'm all for improvements and so forth, but I think at this time, maybe we should do a little more homework, find out what else we can look at, what the pros and cons may be, and then make a determination at a later date. I thank you very much for letting me speak.
Good evening. Peter Cozzolino, City of Milford resident at 31 Gulfview Court. I'm 37 years old. This is my first time at one of these meetings. It's very interesting to me. I'm raising 3 kids in this town, and I am a second-generation small business owner. I'm really speaking in favor of the digital billboards for a few reasons. My first one is, as a resident and somebody that loves the city of Milford, I personally, when talking to a lot of people of different age groups, I think they look modern, and I think it's balanced. It's a balanced approach along I-95. I think they look modern and professional. That's just from my perspective. I don't think it deters from anything. My major reason for supporting them is the economic reason. I tried since I relocated our headquarters to Milford to make a hub for our family parts distribution business. Made Milford my home so I could be close to my family, and tried to advertise and work a budget, and it's expensive. I mean, $2,000 to $4,000 a month is expensive, and my concern was I'd rather have a few impressions to let people know I'm here and to let us know that we're family-owned along that corridor. So the economic benefit is huge. I mean, it's a game changer for us for having a limited advertising budget. And I think it's more than that, too, for us is I'm concerned about my kids' future, if they're going to be the 3rd generation of a family-owned, a brick-and-mortar distributor that supplies parts to the city of Milford or to people that get on their way. I'm concerned against Amazon. I'm going to say, is the brick-and-mortar distributor going to be relevant up against these huge companies that can just bombard everybody over the internet or buy up boards, I think it's a major concern. So I love the economic benefit that we can compete against the major advertisers. I don't think it deters. Somebody made a comment earlier about if it's distracting. As I drive through the state, I lived in Connecticut my whole life, I don't see any difference between a brightly lit billboard with the billboard lights that are on and a digital billboard. I think really distracted driving, I think, is a huge problem in America, is young people on their cell phones and all these big screens they put in the vehicle. I think as people drive down the road, the difference between somebody looking up at a regular billboard of original style to modern digital, I really see no difference. I think change is always scary for everybody, but I think they look very professional, and I think it's balanced. One other thing I wanted to say was I'm kind of all over the place. I had a lot of ideas. I'm passionate about the city of Milford and proud to be a resident. And I talk to friends from everywhere from New England to Texas. And the city of Milford is really a really cool, great place to live and attracting a lot of young people. And I think this adds in a lot of ways economically too, because I'm concerned about this. The state of Connecticut, a lot of my friends have had to move out of the state because jobs have been lost or moved on. And I think having advertising and affordable, and I don't think all it can do is help. I don't see any negative. So hope that was helpful to add. Thank you.
Anyone else wishes to speak for or against this application?
Donna Dotko, Buckingham Avenue. I just want to comment that they think that Amazon's not going to advertise on these billboards. They're probably going to be like the #1 advertiser. So it's going to be Amazon Prime, it's going to be Amazon this, and they're going to pay more than your local businesses. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak for or against this application? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a minute to reply to Mr. Anderson's comment and a couple of the other comments, and we have our traffic engineer who might be able to reply to some of the comments just very briefly. To answer Mr. Anderson's question, the billboard that was eliminated due to the way the reg change is defined was not the Gloria Complex, the Gloria Commons billboard. It was the one on 0 Warfield Street adjacent to the DOT right away, going if you're traveling on the southbound side, it's on the right-hand side of the highway, to answer that question. To answer the question again, or to talk about it briefly about the slippery slope, this reg change was designed to impact the existing billboards on I-95. I had mentioned at the beginning of the first hearing, my druthers would have been, if this hadn't been circulating around for 5 years with different authors and different applicants and attorneys involved in it, and a lot of people having their hands in the regulation, I would have come in and said, just allow conversion of the existing billboards, period, end of discussion. That was not something that my understanding that DPLU staff or Mr. Sulkus agreed with. They wanted additional definitions, so this is the route we came. To be very clear, and we've said it several times now to answer one of Ms. Dutko's points, is they are not building new billboards or putting, under this regulation and under federal and state statutes and distance requirements, there are not going to be new billboards built on I-95 in Milford that are digital billboards. This regulation is conversion of existing legal conforming and legal non-conforming billboards only. Mr. Gannon had touched briefly on it. He thinks the market conditions, because it's not going to happen probably anytime soon. If it does, they're extremely expensive to convert. If you saturate the market with them, you're going to get less money for them. These billboard owners, most of them are owned by, own at least more than one billboard. So there's a lot of market reasons why you most likely, and I understand the billboard allows that right now it's 6 billboards. The existing 6 billboards only, the likelihood is you'll probably see at the most 4 converted. That's my understanding based on conversations and the market conditions. 4 of those, which ones those would be, I don't know. But just to be really clear on that, so there's no requirement that each application then come before the board again and be reapproved for a board that's already existing. I'll ask Mr. Hua to come up and speak briefly about the traffic study that was discussed.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission and the staff. My name is Kermit Hua. I'm a traffic engineer, professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, and nationally certified professional traffic operations engineer. I have 22 years of experience in traffic engineering. I reviewed a number of documents submitted for this application. During this hearing, one of the documents that have been repeatedly discussed is the Federal Highway Study in 2012. Now, I know there have been some criticisms from some parties, and including some audience I heard tonight of that study, essentially, pointing to the methods used in that for that study. But my question really is this: Federal Highway Administration, they're an arm of the federal government, and they spend all this resources and did all these analysis, came up with all these data. And I never read anything, never heard anything from the opposing party, what kind of experiment or data they have that, prove the otherwise. I know it's easy to take pot shot at this federally sponsored study, but with this being the authoritative study we have up to this point, I think it is useful to at least use this as a guideline and if you have criticism of the study, you have to come up with your own data, you have your own method to see what the real situation is. Up to now, I did a lot of research. I have not seen any other studies, any other extensive experiments that have been conducted in this area. So, one thing that has not been mentioned tonight is what really is the conclusion of the FHWA 2012 study. I think the key point is related to the traffic engineering concept or 2-second concept. In other words, it is sort of a rule of thumb concept of 2 seconds in traffic engineering. In other words, we don't recommend you take your attention, take your eye from your main driving task more than 2 seconds. Some people have argued that if you do that, the chance for accidents increase at least increase by 100%. Now, within that context, let's look at what the FHWA study found. FHWA study essentially looked at the static advertisement board and the digital advertisement board to see what's the duration of drivers looking at those boards. The conclusion found in that study is less than 0.4 seconds for both static and electronic boards. So that is not even close to the 2-second guidelines. So in other words, and by the way, those two static boards and electronic boards results are very similar, both under 0.4 second. With the electronic boards, they probably look a little bit longer, 0.3 something, and the static boards also 0.3 something. So in the context of the 2-point threshold, 2-point criteria we use as traffic engineer, those 0.4 seconds are not significant. In other words, the conclusion from the FHWA study is this is not even an issue as far as the diverting drivers' attention from a main task of driving. So FHWA found no issue with static boards, no issue with electronic boards. Actually, The applicant tonight also submitted a letter, and an expert actually in this kind of digital board. That gentleman is based in Philadelphia. His conclusion essentially is, by the way, he did a number of experiments. He looked at what the traffic accident statistics after electronic boards were installed in many states. At least the 3 studies I read is he studied a location in New Mexico, in Virginia, and in Ohio. And in all those 3 locations, after electronic boards were installed, there were no correlation with an increase in traffic accidents. Obviously, you can argue there are other factors in play, and there are always other factors in play. But I think, based on those data, you can confidently say, after you install traffic boards, you are not likely to see an increase in traffic accidents. And I agree, that engineer study. And so just wrap up, I'll be glad to answer any questions the board may have. Is again, going back to the 2-second threshold, I don't think in my professional judgment those boards will create any safety concerns. Thank you very much. That's all I have. Any questions? Yes.
Mr. Kersaden, any additional before we leave it back to the public?
No, I think, I don't know about the format of that. I think typically would be our time to rebut, and then the hearing would be closed.
I
We
believe
don't have
he
any
introduced
additional
new
information.
correct? So the audience can come back.
It's at your discretion.
Yeah.
We just responded to the question about the study, but we can go.
So if anyone from the audience wishes to speak in regards to the traffic study just presented, please come forward. Seeing none, Attorney Kersaden.
Thank you for the time, and if we don't have a meeting at the end of the month, thank the members that are leaving the board and for your service on the board over the years, and we'd ask you that you close the public hearing. Thank you.
Before we close the public hearing, any questions from the board at this time?
I do have a question, and I'm not sure who can answer it, but as an advertiser, how long do you expect or need someone to look at something that it makes a difference to them?
What the advertiser gets out of I can speak to what they get out of the digital billboard is the repetitiveness of it. So they're coming up over 1,000 times a day. So as far as the specifics of that, I don't know the direct answer to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's well, I think it's a fair question, but I hear this 0.4 seconds, and if I look at that for 0.4 seconds, I'm not sure I'd remember what. So it seems to me an advertiser wants you to look at something longer, and I'm wondering how that really figures into this.
Well, when you're looking at a digital billboard, you're potentially seeing maybe 1 or 2 full ads as you're going by, depending on the viewing of the billboard or the amount of time you have to view it. So we have seen more and more requests from our advertisers for these digital billboards. So to give you a specific, I don't know, but I do know that more and more advertisers are requesting these the boards. So I just don't have a specific. Mm-hmm. Well, the only thing I would say is that they're getting more and more popular, so it's working for the advertisers. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Marlowe's question there. So as part of a digital manufacturer, we also provide services for content creation. And with digital billboards, it's different from on-premise billboards in that they're already designed for traffic going for 70 miles an hour at a minimum read distance of 70 feet away. So it's designed for quick glance. Now, once in a while, you see advertisements that go up that have a lot of text. You know, you're trying to read it, and those are poorly designed ads. Now, with digital billboards and the availability of content curation on the part of operators, they're designed to have maximum impact, like memorable impact, but the minimum number of words. So next time, if you're driving down the highway, and just note how many words are on a digital billboard, you'll find that in general it will be less than 10 words because the content operator would guide the advertisers to the kind of content they would create. Thank you.
Mr. Sack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Either you or Mr. Sokas could answer the question. If we close the hearing tonight and there's a vote, how many votes are needed to affirmatively pass this?
As a regulation change, I believe it's a simple majority.
Any other questions from the board? There's no objection. I would like to close the public hearing. And with the board permission, should we vote on this evening, or should we wait? Please keep note that I believe 1/3 of our commission will be leaving us for the new year, and they will not be here to vote on this. And the new commission will have to get up to speed in regards to this application.
Mr. Chair, if you don't vote on it tonight, then we would have a meeting in 2 weeks.
Oh, yes, that's correct. So should we hold off on voting this evening from the board? No objection, we will hold the meeting, hold off on voting for this evening, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So the next item on the agenda, we'll go back to our new business, which should be voted on by February 6, 2020. For Seaview Avenue, Zone R-10, petition of John Paoletti for coastal site plan review for construction of a single-family home on map 6, block 84, parcel 46, of which Mark D. Gregorio Salbani's Way, LLC, is the owner.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. My name is Michael Obimichow. I'm with the firm of Nowakowski, Obimichow and Kane. We're located in Shelton, Connecticut.
If you can bring the mic closer to you, please.
I thought I was close enough. Okay, sorry. What we're here for tonight is proposal of a new construction on number 4 Seaview Avenue, because we are within the coastal area management area. We have to come before the board for a camp report. I did get a letter from town engineer on a few items that he would like to be addressed. I did talk to Greg this afternoon. I did address, though, made the modifications to the camp report and the plan. I did bring plans within the camp report and the map with me tonight. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Mr. Salkis.
The proposed new single-family dwelling, which replaces a former dwelling on the same property, is approximately 31.7 feet above average grade in height and located fully in the AE 11 flood zone. The slab located in the crawl space needs to be above the lowest adjacent grade. There appears to be no adverse impact to coastal resources. The city engineer recommends that concrete sidewalks and curbs be installed. And if you move to have a motion on this, I would recommend you read the motion, and I believe those items are on there.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, do we have a motion? Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve as presented the petition of John Paoletti for a coastal site plan review for construction of a single-family home on map 6, block 84, parcel 46, of which Mark DeGiorgio, Salbina's Way, LLC is the owner, with the following condition. The applicant shall provide concrete curbs and sidewalks per the city engineer's review dated 12/2/2019.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Pass it.
Thank
The
you.
next item on the agenda is 117 Broad Street, Zone MCDD, petition of Rick Jerzik, Founder's House, for a site plan review for a finding of parking adequacy on map 54, block 394, parcel 15, of which Rick Jerzik is the owner.
Good evening. My name is Chris Saley. I live at 19 Marsh Street, Milford, and I'm a partner with Rick Jerzik. He's unavailable to attend tonight because of a business arrangement.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
My name is Chris Saley. I live at 19 Marsh Street in Milford. My partner, Rick Jerzik, was unavailable, so I'm speaking in behalf of the applicant, or behalf of the proposal. 117 is the old Rainbow Gardens. We purchased the property in September of this year with the anticipation of doing some minor modifications to the building, cleaning it up and turning it back and starting to open up a new business. When we got into the building and we started moving some of the old equipment, the kitchen floor was in pretty bad shape, along with some other structural issues. So we went and got a demo permit and took a lot of the walls and interior partitions in the kitchen down and took the floor up, at which time we realized that the front portico wasn't in the best of shape. It was very confusing. There was an ADA ramp that, like I said, was very confusing. You had to come up, turn, go around, and then turn again. Anyone that walked in, it was not, I don't think, a really accessible building. So we decided to go out and purchase a ramp, a lift that will go similar to what the VFW has, but it's going to be tucked in underneath the present building. We're also going to replace some of the pickets on one of the outside patios and enclose that for a four-season porch with like a nano wall window, so in the wintertime we can shut it and it will be warm. We're doing nothing on the outside. The perimeters, nothing's changed. The fire department has asked us to review and take a look at covering the back staircase, which presently is open to the weather. That's one of the things we'll be looking at. And I'm just here for your consideration to look at the building.
Thank you, Mr. Sokas.
The applicant is proposing to do an interior reconfiguration, which has already been permitted, and to enclose approximately 200 square foot porch for year-round dining, and to add a handicap lift. The name suggests a patio, which is also part of the project, but is not shown on the plans. Actually, we got a later survey that does show a patio, which we'll get to in a second. The plans, as submitted, don't clearly show the additions. One additional parking spot would be needed for the new addition, plus additional spots for the patio if one is to be utilized based on the proposed size of one space for each 250 square feet of patio. Sewer review and health department reviews have occurred under the building permit for the interior renovation. The only question I have is, on the submitted site plan, Chris, it shows a patio. Is that, in fact, is that the size of the patio that's actually there?
Yeah, so David, the plans that we submitted were done in 2009, previous to us purchasing it, but there was, when we purchased the property, there was always a patio there. I assumed, maybe incorrectly, that it was permitted and approved by the board, but it was submitted, I'm not saying to your office, but to Planning and Zoning in 2009. That's the copy that that made copies and brought to your attention.
Yeah.
you are correct, we are enclosing an area. That's where I was a little confused, and I apologize, I'm not up to speed with this. I don't normally come to these anymore, but my partner was unavailable to get here. But we're enclosing an area, we're not increasing the area, we're just leaving it exactly what, all we're doing is making it a four-season porch as opposed to just an open porch to the summertime. And we're eliminating the ADA ramp that was there that was, in my opinion, unsightly with the pickets. It's going to be more in line with the architectural detail of the building. And we think it's going to have a nicer look. We're also, the areas that we're renovating, we're taking off the vinyl siding and putting on a hardy plank to match the color. And our goal is to eventually hardy plank the whole building as time progresses.
That's all great, and it's going to be fantastic. To bring you up to speed, you're actually here for finding a parking adequacy because you have, you know, a limited amount of parking, and we basically, the board has to determine what would be an adequate amount of parking for you to have and to say, in fact, under Section 5 of our regulations, okay, it's okay that it's not there. We basically grant it as being adequate. So it would just be helpful to know how many spaces the board needs to find adequacy for. So we know what the interior is, and it would be helpful if you could you take a guess as to how large the patio is on the outside?
I would say it's no more than 200 square feet, but the map is scalable. Honestly, David, I didn't realize. I was told I was here because the board wanted to look at the enclosure that we were doing. I had no idea because one of the reasons we enjoyed we looked at the property is it's very unique in Milford in the green. I think the zoning regulations allow us to, similar to what we did at the Bridge House, on-street parking, and there's plenty of on-street parking because that's the least dense populated area in regards to parking at night or during the day. Even for, you know, train parking, people don't typically park in that area. So I didn't realize that. But so I would think that the parking or the area in question, the patio, which was there since 2009, is probably somewhere in the ballpark of 200 square feet. But I assume you have
Well, actually, we know that on the 2009 survey, there's a patio shown. Yeah. I guess my question is, do you know, is what's on that plan the same as what's actually out there?
I believe it is.
Okay.
We've never touched it, so it's nothing we've touched.
Okay. So then you probably need parking adequacy for, I think, 3 spaces. Let me just do a quick calculation. Okay, so if it's 200 square feet of patio and 200 square feet of interior, then you basically need parking adequacy of 2 parking spaces.
Okay.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Marlowe.
I move to approve as presented the petition of Rick Jerzik, I move to approve as presented the petition of Rick Jerzik, Founder House, for a site plan review for a finding of parking adequacy on map 54, block 394, parcel 15, of which Rick Jerzik is the owner. Mr. Solkis, do we have to put in the 2 spots into that, or is that not?
You can mention in the motion that it's parking adequacy for 2 additional parking spots.
So if we could add that into it for parking adequacy for 2 spots.
I'll second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Passes.
Thank you very much. Have a great holiday.
Keeping up with the revised agenda, we'll go on to item E, public hearings closed by January 7th, 2020. Voted by March 12, 2020. Moving on to item 3, 63 Washington Street, Zone R 12.5, petition of Thomas Lynch Esquire for an amendment to the special permit for change of 2 one-bedroom units within 2 to 2-bedroom units on map 26, block 263, parcel 15, of which 830-G LLC is the owner.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just for the record, Thomas Lynch. I'm here representing my clients Bill Colombo and Peter Romick, who have been sitting in the second row back there. And we appreciate, this has been a long meeting for you, so we're going to end with a very short presentation to you. This project at 63 Washington Street was originally approved by the board in 2008. We came back to you. The developer at that time didn't move forward with the project because of market conditions and the collapse of the economy at that time. We came back to you last July, I think it was July of 2018, with a revised plan with a different layout. It was the townhouse-style units with garages. The prior plan had parking in the parking lot. And we're before you with a very simple request now. There's 6 units, 1-bedrooms with dens that were originally approved. We want to convert 2 of the units, actually the 2 affordable units, to 2-bedroom units. We appeared before the Sewer Commission. We received approval from the Sewer Commission in April of this year. Quite honestly, we had sought to change a few more of the units to 2-bedroom units, but because of the sewer allocation for that property, it was decided that the maximum that we could go to would be 4 1-bedroom units and 2 2-bedrooms. So this is a minor amendment to our special permit. There's no change in the site plan at all. There's no change in the floor plans other than adding a closet to 2 of the units that were set up as dens before, and that's the extent of the application to you. So I'd ask that you approve it, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Mr. Sulcus, any additional information we need?
The affordability plan and marketing plan have to be updated, and I believe Mr. Lynch, in his discussions with Sheila Dravis, who's our fair housing officer, have determined that the 2 affordable units will each be rented at 60% of the median family income level.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Marlowe.
Just a quick question, Attorney Lynch.
Yes.
No problems with amount of parking increasing to?
No, this doesn't change that at all. Each unit has the garage and then the 1 parking space, and then again, from the site plan, actually Ron Wasmer is here. He had designed the site plan. There were parking spaces on the site plan that you approved, but because of the fact that it's an 830G project, the zoning regulations don't apply, but there is adequacy of parking. There's two spaces for each unit.
Mr. Satt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Lynch. Good evening.
Hi.
Can you give us 60% of 1 and 80% of the median, approximately how much is going to be charged?
Yes, I have the affordability plan with me, Bob, and the 2 affordable units, because the project is under six units or less, you have to have the majority of the units be rented to those at the 60% income level. So for the 2-bedroom units, the rent for those at the 60% would be it's on the last page here. $1,280.10.
And the 80%?
The 80% rental rate is $1,647.50.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is a public hearing. I'd like to open it up to the public for anyone who wish to speak for or against this application. Seeing none, I would like to close the public hearing. Leave it up to the board if we'd like to vote on this evening, or leave it open.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right. We'd like to vote on it. Mr. Collegian.
I move to approve with conditions the petition of Thomas Lynch Esquire for an amendment to the special permit for change of 2 one-bedroom units with den to 2-bedroom units on map 26, block 263, parcel 15, of which 830G LLC is the owner. The condition being that both affordable units shall be rented at 60% of the median family income level.
You have a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Passes.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Our next item on the agenda is item 188 Cherry Street, Zone CDD-1, petition of Robert Smith for a special permit for construction of a mixed-use office building with 18 apartments on map 66, block 825, parcel 18, of which Metro 188 LLC is the owner.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ben Gettinger of Lynch Traub, Keefe and Arante, 52 Trumbull Street, New Haven, Connecticut, for the applicant Robert Smith and Metro 188 LLC for a special permit to construct a mixed-use commercial building and 18 apartments at 188 Cherry Street on a CDD-1 zone. With me today are John Wicko, the project architect, and Ronald Wassmer, the project engineer. And we'll start our presentation with Mr. Wicko.
Good evening. Here to talk about the site plan and the building. Excuse my voice, I've tightened up this afternoon. All the reports from the city department reviews are in that are mandatory. I think we're still waiting for Public Works and Tree Commission, but the essential ones are in and all approved. The site at 188 Cherry Street is across from the Milford Plaza, single-family residence. I think you maybe have seen it now that they've taken some trees down for environmental work. It's a triangular-shaped lot existing with a gentle slope from the rear at the residence district towards the front, which is Cherry Street. I'm going to flip to the site plan. And we're proposing a building that is towards the front of the site, having the 20-foot yard setback and close to the northeast property line with a 8.8 yard setback and ample setback spaces for the other remaining yards. The drive aisle is parallel to the angular property line that leads to the major parking lot in the rear. The zoning data is on that sheet also, which everything does comply. So we don't want to go through that. These engineering ones, Ron can talk briefly about the grading, drainage, utility. I'm just going to zip through, and if there's any questions, because we could go on longer, but it's a long night. And then to get to SD1, which depicts the above-ground details that were prepared, the parking striping, signage, apron details, things for engineering. Review, we also, on the next detail sheet, we have the dumpster enclosure, which is block and brick, which matches the building. We're depicting a sign that we may propose, but showing that it's in conformance with the sign regulation. Also, we have the lamp pole detail, which meets the requirements for the lighting, which we'll go over in a few minutes. Ron's got some details too for the underground utilities and engineering. It leads us to the landscape plan, which is quite a nice design by Matt Pop of ELS. He's done a lot of projects for us before. He just does a great job. There's a great mix of trees and shrubs and different plant material. Street trees and all the buffers are well planted and appropriately planted. Good variety of even smaller plants that are around the building. So it's be a very attractive site for the tenants and the owner. Site lighting was done by a consultant, and all of the requirements are met for the zero residential photometric towards the residential properties, and the 1.0 at the adjacent commercial. That's not taking into account that we do have a 6-foot fence that runs the building from the front yard back through the backyard and down towards the front to the front of the building again. So that does provide even more cutoff. It also has the keys on there with the fixtures that are scheduled on SL2. There's a kind of a nifty, real life kind of interpretation of nightlight that you see. Shows how the site will be illuminated. And the specs are on that sheet. And we also included all the cut sheets for the lighting fixtures themselves, showing that they're full cut off and the wattage and all that things that were designed to give you the picture that you saw before. Architecturally, it's a 3-story building. There is one correction on the square foot summaries. We eliminated the basement, and this chart does not show that, so the actual square footage is 16,650 square feet, where it says 19,974 when it included the basement storage. So this foundation plan shows that it's a slab on grade. The 1/8-inch floor plans shows the commercial floor, which is a third of the property, or third of the building area, has a shop storage area in the rear and the business office end of that operation towards the front. We also have on this plan the second floor, which shows 9 studio apartments, and the third floor on A2 shows the remaining 9, totaling 18 studio apartments in the configurations. A3 and 4 are the 1/4-inch plans, giving you a better idea of what the layouts are and of those apartments, with the unit schedule also describing the square footages, which all meet the requirements. Let me just go to the building elevations, and the perspective is probably a better place to look at. We did prepare a color rendering of the building on the site, and it shows this is an angle, if you're going, what would it be, northeast on Cherry Street. The angled portion of the building where the entrances are. The front portion, as you see, has a hip roof. The center section is flat with some decorative cornice railing, which conceals, but you won't even see because the building's large enough that we have the mechanical units on that flat section. There are no, excuse me, no units on the ground. And then the elevator, lobby, and the circulation for the residential entrance is there. That's the residential entrance, and this is the business entrance with the office towards the front. The color scheme is what we've decided and worked through with the building owner. It's a combination of gray glazed brick with various siding materials, horizontal clapboard, and some wider beveled board in the center section to add some interest, but we are using the gray brick and a precast cap to anchor the building to the ground. We'll go back to these drawings. So the next set of drawings are the 1/4-inch elevations, which describe the building height. which is within the allowable 40 feet in the CDD1 zone. We have midpoint and also the higher flat roof. So the average building is actually lower than 40, it's 38 and 39 respectively. And it also describes the materials and the details in more larger scale. That's the rear. This shows, which we haven't seen before, is the rear elevation, which has an overhead door and a man door into a shop area. So there's capability of shop vans to drive into this space that's designed for a specific tenant. And then this is the other side elevation, which faces the dentist. And we like to include the building sections to show the different floor heights and the overall height with the volumes, and those are on A10 and A11. That is a quick run-through of the building, and Ron, you'd like to maybe talk a little about the engineering.
Good evening. For the record, Ronald Wasmer, professional engineer, 158 Research Drive. I'll be brief. I know it's late, and you've listened to a lot of people talk tonight. I did the civil engineering for the project. It's going to be served by public utilities, public sewer, public water. It's been reviewed by the various departments: sewer commission, engineering department, police department, fire department. All these departments and commissions have submitted favorable reviews of the plans, and all utilities will be underground. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them. Other than that, that's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Sulkus.
The applicant is proposing an approximately 20,000 square foot building with first floor commercial space and storage and 18 efficiency apartment units combined on the second and third floors with 34 parking spaces. The proposed project is substantially zoning compliant.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Sack.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Whoever would like to answer, I have 3 questions. Would you just tell us what an efficiency apartment is?
The efficiency is a living quarter without a bedroom.
Thank you. On the Sunnyside Court area, and again, I'm looking at my Dropbox smartphone, I look at it. Is there going to be access to that area on Sunnyside Court? And the reason is there's something that says B-T parking. If you could just explain that, please.
Access pedestrian or vehicular? Or both? Well, there is no pedestrian or vehicular access to Sunnyside Court. The only entrance is from Cherry Street.
Thank you.
And there's a fence that surrounds the property also, so pedestrians won't be able to walk back and forth either.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. I would like to open it up to the public. If anyone wishes to speak for or against this application, please come forward. Seeing none, would you like to speak to end this, Mr. Gettinger?
Sure, thank you. I'll just end with, in additionally to being fully regulation compliant, it is going to replace a very blighted piece of property. And I know in speaking with the neighbors, they're looking forward to this project because, again, it will be replacing a very blighted piece of property.
Thank you. Is there any reason why I cannot close this public hearing this evening? Public hearing is now closed. Should we vote on this evening? I would entertain a motion. Mr. Marlowe.
188 Cherry Street, I move to approve as presented the petition of Robert Smith for a special permit for construction of a mixed-use office building with 18 apartments on map 66, block 825, parcel 18, of which Metro 188 LLC is the owner.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? Ms. Austin. All in favor? Anyone opposed? So moved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Our next item on the agenda is liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports this evening? Seeing none. The next item is subcommittee reports. Do we have any subcommittee reports? Seeing none. Next item is approval of minutes from November 19th, 2019. Do we have an approval for the minutes? Motion for approval for the minutes from November 19th, 2019. Ms. Kearney?
I move to approve the minutes from the 11/19 meeting.
You have a second? Mr. Marlowe. Our next item on the agenda is Chair's Report. Chair's Report, I would like to, on behalf of our chairperson who is not here today, we would like to give out some certificates in regards to service recognition for...
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We have one more meeting to go. I think it would be more appropriate to hand those out at the last meeting.
Well, he just wanted to make sure if they were all here, he wanted to give them out, just in case they're not here for the next meeting.
Your call.
Would you like to wait on those? Oh, they want to wait. They would like to wait. So we have some certificates waiting for you for your last meeting. Mr. Grant, Mr. Panzella, and Mr. Marlowe. All right, so our next, I have no other chair report information. Our next item on the agenda is the staff report.
Sure. At the last couple of meetings, there's been discussion about perhaps amending the annual schedule that was submitted to the clerk, or changing the schedule with the new board coming in. So I did some research, and just to confirm a few things, the board has until the 31st of January next year to amend its schedule with the city clerk. The catch is, and this is why we typically do it in November, is that when we file the next year's schedule with the city clerk, no meetings can take place for 30 days after the filing with the city clerk, which is why we do it early. So if the new board in January decides that the schedule you want to change the format back to what it was or something different, then the board can do that by the 31st, and the schedule that's currently in place would be in effect until 30 days after the amended schedule is filed with the city clerk. So,
thank you. I have a motion for adjournment. So move.